Well, once again, welcome. As we just heard, Psalm 23, very familiar, a sermon on its own, which is a wonderful sermon about the Good Shepherd. This Psalm 23 we just read is probably the most recognized passage in the entire Old Testament. Everybody's heard that before. Everybody's heard it. Why? Because it's often read at funeral services. And everybody's going to have one of those someday, regardless if there's going to be anybody to show up or not. And it's read quite often. And this Psalm 23 anticipates the blessings of the deceased that they will have in eternity as God's children, if that's the case. And we know how that works. But it is a matter of an encouragement as we send a farewell to one of our loved ones in Christ. We can recognize that psalm is very comforting for what they get to experience, and it's very comforting for what we get to experience now. It brings comfort to those left behind, recognizing then that God is the ultimate provider of blessings. Psalm 23, even quoted by or written by King David, who had supposedly everything he needed, but what did he do? He recognized the Lord is my shepherd, and because of him I shall not want, meaning I will not be lacking anything. And this theme of shepherds and shepherding and sheep is throughout the Old Testament, as you know. And it's a perfect illustration in the Old Testament and the entire Bible itself with the relationship of God and his people. It's been going on way before even Psalm 23 was written. And with this, most people have not submitted to the Good Shepherd. Most people, Jesus tells us, are going through the wide gate because they have not submitted to this shepherd. Most people will not say, the Lord is my shepherd. And with this, and that's from Matthew 7:13 that Jesus talks about this. The Bible warns about false shepherds who try to entice sheep away from the true shepherd, God himself, the Good Shepherd. This warning Jesus gave was in Matthew 7:15. And so here in Ezekiel, we have an example of these false shepherds so that we can appreciate the Good Shepherd. So it's going to be a long passage here, but it doesn't mean the sermon's going to be any longer. So if you want to turn there, you can. Ezekiel chapter 34. I'm going to be reading a big chunk. Ezekiel 34, 1-16. This is Ezekiel speaking. Then the word of Yahweh, that's the Lord, that's God, came to me saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to those shepherds, thus says Lord Yahweh. Woe, shepherds of Israel, who have been shepherding themselves. Should not the shepherds shepherd the flock? You eat the fat and clothe yourself with wool. You sacrifice the fat sheep without shepherding the flock. Those who are sickly you have not strengthened, and the diseased you have not healed, and the broken you have not bound up, and the scattered you have not brought back, nor have you searched for the lost. But with strength and with the severity you have dominated them. He is slamming these guys. Verse 5, they were scattered for lack of a shepherd, and they became food for every beast of the field and were scattered. And this is describing the history of Israel. They were scattered. Verse 6 says this, my flock wandered through all the mountains on every high hill. My flock was scattered all over the surface of the earth, and there was none and no one to seek or search for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. As I live, declares the Lord Yahweh, surely because my flock has become plunder, my flock has even become food for all the beasts of the field for lack of a shepherd. And my shepherd did not seek for my flock. but rather the shepherds shepherded themselves and did not shepherd my flock. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. He's kind of angry. Verse 10. Thus says the Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will seek my flock from their hand, and make them cease from shepherding the flock. So the shepherds will not shepherd themselves anymore, but I will deliver my flock from their mouth, so that they will not be food for them. Verse 11, for thus says Lord Yahweh, behold, I myself will seek my sheep and care for them, as a shepherd cares for his herd in the day when he is among his sheep, which are spread out. So I will care for my sheep, and I will deliver them from all the places to which they were scattered on a cloudy and gloomy day. I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries and bring them to their own land, and I will shepherd them on the mountains of Israel by the streams and in all the inhabited places of the land. I will shepherd them in a good pasture, and their grazing ground will be on the mountain heights of Israel, and they will lie down on good grazing ground and be shepherded in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I will shepherd my flock, and I will make them lie down, declares the Lord Yahweh. I will search for the lost, bring back the scattered, bind up the broken, strengthen the sick, but the fat and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd them with judgment. This is Ezekiel 34, 1-16. And just as David said, the Lord is my shepherd, God is the good shepherd. Pretty clear. God is the good shepherd. God, Yahweh himself, the Hebrew pronunciation of God. Now, let's see what happens. In John chapter 10, Jesus comes along and he follows up with this good shepherd theme. Jesus says this in John chapter 10. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the sheep of the field, but climbs into another way, he's a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him, the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice. And the sheep calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings all his own out, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but will flee from him, because they do not know the voice of strangers. Verse 6, this figure of speech Jesus spoke to them, but they did not understand those things which he had begun saying to them. Now let me just stop for a minute. We kind of have an understanding what Jesus was saying because we just read Ezekiel. They probably just didn't read Ezekiel, but we have the pleasure of that. So Jesus said again to them, truly, truly, I say to them, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, as we learn in Ezekiel. But the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anybody enters through me, he will be saved and go in, and I will find pasture. Verse 10, the thief comes in only to steal and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd. Okay, we've been anticipating this good shepherd, and Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming, but leaves the sheep and runs and flees. The wolf snatches and scatters them, because he is a hired hand and he's not concerned about the sheep. And again, Jesus says this then. Once again, I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. Even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep, and I have other sheep which are not of this fold, which is, he's talking about other sheep other than Israel. I must bring them also. Aren't you glad he's bringing us also? And they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it up again. No one takes it away from me, but myself, I lay it down. I have authority to take it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. So we're going to be in Mark. We're going to find out more about this good shepherd pretty obvious the trail we follow. We follow first chronologically Psalm 23 by David, talking about the Lord is my shepherd. Why? Because these other guys are knuckleheads. These other guys are false shepherds. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. Mark 6:30 is where we're going to be today. Verses 3 to 44 shows 10 attributes of the good shepherd. We're going to see 10 attributes of the good shepherd so that you may seek his perfect righteousness and by doing this receive his abundant blessings. So now we're going to go read through a longer portion and then slow down a little bit. We're going to be in Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 44. And we're reviewing a section that we've already talked about, but it fit into the section about 3 weeks ago, and it fits into this section. So for context, we will look at this again. And the apostles gathered together with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And just a quick review, but I'll be giving a better one later. They had come back from doing their first missionary work on the Great Commission that God had sent them out on. And he said to them, which, like I said, we covered this a few weeks ago, and he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. And here we go with this new section here that we haven't explored yet. And the people saw them going. Which people? The ones that have been following them. All the people that they were trying to get away from. Because they were just exhausted. And many recognized them and ran there together on foot from all the cities and got there ahead of them. Okay, they took a boat, Jesus and the 12, they took a boat across, and we're going to explain it in a minute, but it's basically 4 miles across the lake, the Sea of Galilee, and to walk or run, it would have been 8 miles around, but yet they were so eager to see Jesus that they ran, and they got there before Jesus and the disciples got there. And when Jesus went ashore, verse 34, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. 35. And when it was already quite late, the disciples came to him and began saying, this place is desolate and it's already quite late, so send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside villages and buy themselves something to eat. But, verse 37, he answered them, Jesus said this, you give them something to eat. As we would have, all said, And they said to him, and this is what they said, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? I mean, when you first hear their response to Jesus, it should kind of make you cringe a little bit, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go look. And they found out, and they said, 5 and 2 fish. And he commanded them to all sit down by groups on the green grass, to sit down in groups on the green grass. And they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up towards heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves, and he kept giving it to them, to the disciples, to set before them, the people. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. Wow. All like 24 people ate and satisfied. No, it was more than 24 people. And they picked up, after they did this and fed them, and they were all satisfied, they picked up 12 full baskets of broken pieces and also of the fish, and there were 5,000 men who ate the loaves. Okay. Interesting scenario. Everybody knows this story. I mean, pretty much every kid that's ever spent a couple days in kindergarten or in Sunday school have heard this story. So, like I mentioned, the disciples, the 12, had just come back from an adventure. They were preaching the gospel. They had the authority to cast out demons and heal people. They came back. They reported to Jesus what happened, and they were excited, but exhausted. You could just imagine. And he got back and he says, "Hey, come back and we're going to get some rest now." They were obviously excited and exhausted. So we're going to see with this, with these guys, that's the context. We're going to see 10 attributes of the Good Shepherd so that you may first seek his perfect righteousness, and with this, receive his abundant blessings. So first of all, we see one of the attributes of this Good Shepherd is that he provides, and he provides in this sense, rest. We just talked about that. Come away by yourselves, he said, to a desolate place and rest a while. For there were many people coming and going that didn't even have time to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. So they got to go out into the boat, at least, headed for what they would assume and hope would be even more rest than just a boat ride. But we also know that a boat ride by itself is pretty restful most of the time, unless it's just a big storm. But first, we have this part about this. We have this observation. We see that Jesus has these male under shepherds reporting to him as the chief shepherd. They were out doing this work as under shepherds of him, and they're reporting back to him what he did. So we see that he has that. Now, regarding the rest, they came back, reported what they had done, and with this, they needed rest. Even in the midst of celebration, they were tired. You guys know how it is. You get all excited how to party at your house, a celebration, and you're all excited. That was great. That was a success. I'm exhausted. You guys know about that. Well, especially, I'm sure that you guys will understand this, especially when you're doing ministry and you all these amazing things happen and you come home and you need a nap. Yet, Matthew reports that during this same time, the disciples of John the Baptist had come and reported to Jesus about what happened to John the Baptist. Now, we already know what happened to John the Baptist. We already know Jesus knew what happened to John the Baptist. But the disciples are now coming back. Wow, this is great. We did this. We're so tired. And then all of a sudden they hear about what happened to John the Baptist. So now they're excited and exhausted. And so now they need rest also for their grief. And so he took them out across the lake for some serenity. Like I said, about 4 miles on the boat. The Good Shepherd provides rest for us that we need from good things, from exciting things, and even from our grief. He knows that we need rest. Throughout the Bible, we see right at the very beginning of the Bible, God taking rest, God commanding rest, Jesus giving rest, taking rest and giving rest. We see this. David said this in Psalm 23, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters." That's the refreshment. Does anybody in this room have like a kind of a chaotic life where you need some rest? Even when you're doing the ministry, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's all great, and that's even exhausting. Or I don't know, maybe some of you every once in a while have this thing called a trial, and you're just completely trashed and exhausted. But he intends for his people to have rest. This is what the Good Shepherd provides, is rest. Also, the Good Shepherd, as we see here, has recognition, meaning he's recognized. And the people saw them going. In other words, the people saw the disciples and Jesus all going, and many recognized him, or them, all of them, and ran there together on foot from all the cities and got ahead of him. Okay, do you think they recognized Jesus? That they're going to run 8 miles? Are you sure it's him to run 8 miles faster than the boat can go across 4 miles? Do you think they recognized him? Yes, they knew who he was. They would do anything to follow Jesus, even denying themselves. They recognized Jesus as the real deal, and they had to be part of it. Does this sound familiar? We've been talking about this word a lot. It's called the calling. It's like, I got to do this. It's another example of people making these great efforts, because this good shepherd is recognized by those that he calls. Luke 9:23 says, if anybody wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. That's what these guys were doing. Why else would these guys run 8 miles unless they recognized him? And then John, of course, as in John 6:2, that they went after Jesus because they saw his signs. They knew he was legitimate. They knew he was the real deal. Everybody knew Jesus was doing work under the power of God. They connected him with God. They knew he was working for God. They knew it was God's power. Everybody knew Jesus was of God, even the ones that didn't want to admit it. Therefore, the truth is that, therefore, if Jesus had the power to do these things of God, that means God, the Father, approved of everything Jesus said and did. The Father would not grant him to represent him and give him the power of doing miracles unless he was legitimate. We've talked about this before, including what we read earlier, John 10:11 and 14 says, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. Who's the good shepherd? Yahweh is the good shepherd. We read through the Old Testament saying that the Lord is my shepherd. We get to Ezekiel where the Lord Yahweh says, I will shepherd my sheep, and describes how that would work. And Jesus shows up and says, I am the good shepherd. If he was not the good shepherd, would God the Father grant an impostor who's lying the ability to do these things that everybody saw? And with this, John 10:4, Jesus had said this earlier, when he brings all his things out, or all his own out, this is talking about the good shepherd. When he brings all his own out of the pen, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. What's with you people here that this guy died 2,000 years ago, and you're here on a Sunday morning in a house, and you're following this guy that's invisible that you've never seen because you have the calling and you have heard his voice. Not necessarily a charismatic experience. It means that you know and you're convinced, I need to follow this Jesus. Because we know his voice. So we see that his recognition of this good shepherd. Everybody knows that he is of God. Some people don't want him as a good shepherd, but they still know who he is. Compassion is another one, verse 34a. And when Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He had compassion because, as we learn in Ezekiel 34, they had no guidance. They were headed for disaster. They were headed to hell by following false shepherds. And David said this about Yahweh, the good shepherd. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his sake. Now let's just chew on that for a minute. Why does Christ guide us in paths of righteousness? What's the guarantee? It's for his sake. He's not going to look stupid. He's going to do exactly what he says he's going to do, because he is not going to be made of a fool. The guarantee that we have in making it to the finish line isn't out of our own work. It's because he already promises we're going to make it to the finish line, and he is not going to look like a fool by making a promise he can't keep. So for his reputation, thank God it's for his reputation that he does these things and not our works. He will not lose any of the sheep, because then he's not the good shepherd. These are all encouraging things about our blessed assurance. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not like in case I do or I might. No, it's even though I do. Anybody here walk through that valley like every day? Even though I'm going through these trials, he says, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And we read this earlier. This is Psalm 23, 3 and 4. He has compassion on his sheep. Then we see his righteousness, the good shepherd's righteousness. He began to teach them many things. About farming? About fixing up Chevys or Fords? About righteousness, about how to follow him to the Father. That's the things he was teaching them. What else would he be teaching them? In all the necessities of life, Christ demonstrates here to first seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and then all the other things will come along. He will provide everything else that you need. We know this, Matthew 6:25-33. After seeking him first, as the sheep follow him, as the sheep say, you're my good shepherd, and you're one of his, you will get everything you need. It's a guarantee. And with this, it says, he taught them many things. Matthew also reports in his episode, Matthew 14:14, that Jesus also healed the sick. So he taught them that the primary focus of Jesus is you got to get this part right. You got to get his teaching before you go after the stuff, because the stuff is only temporary. The teaching is eternal. That's the righteousness. And so this healing of the sick was first accomplished by those who ran the 8 miles to get to Christ. Now, we can assume then that it wasn't necessarily the sick people that ran the 8 miles, but the healthy people that said, I need Jesus, and they were seeking him first and his righteousness first. And then probably somehow these other bringing the sick people caught up. But they were seeking him first, these people, and then he healed these other ailments that they had. And so with this, Christ's teaching is in righteousness is primary, and it's meeting man's greatest need. As opposed to the wicked shepherds of Israel, the good shepherd provides righteousness for his sheep, not drags them off to hell. That's the good shepherd. Then we see his response to the sheep. His response. And when it was already late, this is in verse 35, it was already quite late, his disciples came to him and began saying, this place is desolate and it's already quite late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. And so we see here that the good shepherd responds to the sheep. The sheep know they can go to the good shepherd when they have a problem. And you guys see this with some of your animals. You'll see that they come to you when they're hungry, we know that. But they come to you if they're sick. We see these things. The good shepherd, everybody who's of the good shepherd knows they can pray to the good shepherd because he will hear their prayers. He will respond one way or another. It might not be, as we know, our plan, but he will respond. You see, the good shepherd responds to the requests of the sheep. They know that they could come to him, just like King David said. They were willing to hear the teaching of Christ, yet they were still weak in their flesh and being hungry. They're like, this is good teaching, but they were hungry. And we know, let's assume this way, if the 12 disciples came up, hey, we need to get them a chance to go get some to eat, this disciples' stomachs were probably hollering a little bit too. Like, hey, they could use some food. Yeah, so could we. But anyways, we can see that, yes, we want to hear the teaching, but we also have other needs. And Jesus knows that. He responds. And thankfully, like I said, Jesus says this about all of us, Matthew 26:41, that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We're willing to follow Jesus. We're willing to sit through this sermon, but at the same time, we're exhausted, or we're hungry, or we didn't get enough sleep, or we didn't get enough coffee. We all know that these are things, and he recognizes that about us, thankfully. He responds to his sheep, and the sheep know that they can come to him. And you know this from personal experience. His answer for their prayer request wasn't what they expected at the time. But it is quickly seen that his response was for their good and for his glory. They said, the request was, send them out so they can go get something to eat. And he did respond. He says, you give them something to eat. Well, he responded, but it wasn't the prayer. It wasn't what they had in mind. How many times do we pray and ask for something, and it doesn't work out? It doesn't work out the way we detailed the plan that we presented to God, and then but yet He gives us a whole different plan, and we go, "Wow, I'm glad He didn't. I'm glad that He listened to my request, but not that one." He does that all the time, and we see that here. It's quickly seen here. Their prayer request of them going to the shepherd required unexpected action on their part. So you go pray to the Lord, help me this, help me this, help me that, help me this, and you don't expect that there's actually some action, some things that you may need to be doing along with this. And so it's unexpected action that you may have to take. And many times it's unwelcome action that He requires us to take, right? Yeah, this door will open for you. You're going to have to kick it a few times. You're going to have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And we go, oh, I didn't expect that I have to do something. It happens to us all the time in prayer requests. The shepherd turned their request from Him into something they were to do and participate in doing so that the blessings would flow. And as usual, this didn't set with them well as it doesn't with us. They were irritated by His answer. I mean, they gave a pretty sarcastic answer to Him. They said, "Oh, so we're 200 denarii. You want us to go?" I mean, they were pretty much popping off. And but yet we see the next thing about Jesus. We see His patience. You give them something to eat, He says. And they said to Him, "Shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat?" 200 denarii meant a single man's wages for 8 months. And so they sarcastically went to Jesus, and He could have just smacked him in the mouth and said, "Hey, watch your mouth." But He didn't rebuke them for being sarcastic to Him. Instead, He continued with His plan that would end up blessing them all. He continued with His plan that ended up blessing them all. And it blessed them, and it glorified Christ as the only one that can miraculously answer prayer requests according to His will. And with this, He didn't just give them a task, go do this. Overall, with the task, when He says, go do this, or even in His Bible, we have these things called precepts, which are instructions or what we're supposed to do. He gives us the precepts, which are the directions. It's like we can get, John can handle this, but the rest of us get a box, open up a box, it's a car part, and that's nice that the car part's there, but most of us need directions. I know I'm supposed to replace this thingamabob, but what do I do? If He's expecting us to do something, He will give us direction. And He does this. This is what this perfect good shepherd does. It says verse 38, and He said to them, well, let's start with this. How many loaves do you have? Go look. Go do something. He sent them to go look. And when they found out, they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish. John tells us in his episode again, 6:8, that they'd gotten them from a young man who had them. And then He gave them further instruction on what to be done with the distribution of the food. Gave them instruction, gave them directions, just as He had done earlier. Go out, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to preach the Great Commission, and I'm going to equip you with these things. Go do that. And it's the exact same thing. They have another assignment. The under shepherds have another assignment, and He gives them direction. He doesn't just say, go do it. He gives them instruction. Destruction for those that don't want direction. And He now sends them to do the same. The good shepherd directs his sheep, expecting them to obey, and it'll be under His protection. David says this of this protected discipline. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. He will give us protection and and direction with the rod and the staff. What does that mean? The staff says, whoa, 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 don't go that way, come this way. The rod is, hey, the wolf's coming, whack. But the rod is also for the stubborn sheep that want to keep going that way off the cliff. And he goes, no, bam, a little bit more direction. And that direction we get from his is comforting. And we see then that this good shepherd then demands order. Verses 39-40. And he commanded them, that Jesus. He commanded them all to sit down by groups on the green grass. He commands them to sit down in groups on the green grass. We got two things going on there. Green grass, sound familiar? You get to sit down on the green grass, which is refreshing. But there's a command. He commands something, and he also gives refreshment at the same time. And they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. That was all part of his command. God is the God of order, as Paul says, 1 Corinthians 14:33. For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. And with this, God has terms and conditions for his people that must be observed regardless of their opinion. In other words, okay, so why can't we just have 49 over here and 101 over here? What's with these ridiculous rules of 50 and 100 and all in order? What's all that about? He commanded them to sit in organized groups, and this would have been difficult for both the people, the shepherds, the under shepherds, and the people. Because the under shepherds are going out. Jesus says, go out and command them to do this. And they're looking at Jesus like there's 5,000 and they're and they're kind of unruly. You're expecting me to do this? And the answer is yes. Okay, it's hard for them. And then it's hard for the sheep. It's hard for the sheep. Yet we have no right to question this. The sheep are naturally still sinners. The under shepherds are still sheep who are naturally sinners. But yet, as ridiculous as the command might sound to somebody, why do we have to sit in groups of 50 and 100? Because that's what he said. His gospel requires his terms of belief, repentance, and surrender. He requires things. And like I said, yet with him sitting them on the green grass, when all has been said and done, it was refreshment for them by going along with his commands. Obedience to God's commands bring peace. Well, this doesn't make sense that I have to go do this. Just go do it because he commands it. David said, he makes me lie down in green pastures. That's a relief. Jesus says this, Matthew 11:28, come to me, all who are weary and laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. According to his terms and conditions, this is what he offers. Then this good shepherd offers integrity. Verse 41, and he took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking upward to heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves. This is blessing the food. You know what it means. It's the blessing before we eat. It's the thanksgiving of the food. Jesus practices what he preaches. He makes commands, and yet he demonstrates submission and thankfulness himself. He's a leader that leads by example. He demonstrated prayer of thanksgiving and supplication just as God requires us to do. He did it. Jesus humbled himself and did it. Therefore, by leading by example, he leads by example. And Romans 8:29 says that we are predestined to be conformed to his image. He gives us an example. He leads by an example. He has integrity. He leads from the front, and the sheep follow. He doesn't lead from the back. Go do this, go do this, go do that. And everybody's like, where's that voice coming from? I don't know, but it hurts. And if I turn around, I'm going to get whacked. He leads by example. We can see the good shepherd. We'll talk about this in a few minutes. But we get to see the good example of the good shepherd that we're supposed to follow. Not only that we follow him in the sense of following the good shepherd, but in imitating him. Then we see, of course, this big one. You guys already, it's been there the whole time. The provision of the Good Shepherd. And he kept, this is verse 41, and he kept giving them to the disciples to set before them. He continued on handing them bread. He kept, and he divided up the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 12 full baskets of broken pieces and also of fish. And there were 5,000 men who ate the loaves. The good shepherd will provide for his sheep. Once again, Matthew 6:33. Seek his kingdom, his righteousness first, and all else you will get that you need. And here we see the miraculous provision of Christ. And Matthew reports that in Matthew 14:21, that there's 5,000 men plus women and children. That's like way more than 5,001. It's a whole bunch of people. And with this, we're going to do a quick review of what we just said about the Good Shepherd. As David said, he's my shepherd, I shall not want. In other words, I won't lack anything. And later, as we read earlier about the false shepherds, Yahweh says, I will shepherd the flock, and I will make them lie down, declares the Lord Yahweh. Well, so we see the connection there. And then later, Jesus comes on the scene saying, I am the Good Shepherd. It's a do the math moment here. John 10:11. And throughout the chapter of God, the chapter of John, which talks about God, Jesus furthers his claim to be the Good Shepherd. Throughout John chapter 10 and other parts of the Bible, he claims to be the Good Shepherd until finally at the end of John chapter 10, verse 31, the Jews picked up stones to stone him. Why? They gave this reason. Because Jesus said, so what are you stoning me for? I mean, what did I do wrong? What kind of good work did I do wrong? And they said this, for good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, because you being a man make yourself out to being God. What does that mean? Because Jesus says, I'm the Good Shepherd. Who's the Good Shepherd? Yahweh. They knew what he was talking about. They perfectly understood that Jesus was claiming to be God. They knew it, and he knew it. And with this, if there was ever a test of Christ being a liar, a lunatic, or really the Lord, it was now. If there was ever a test of who Jesus was, it was now. Well, is he a liar? Or is he just some crazy guy that's claiming to be God? Or is he really the Lord? He was put on the test today. If there was ever any confusion, he proved it with this miracle. If he was not really God himself would have not allowed him to commit blasphemy and then honor him and giving him all this power. In fact, he would throw him in hell. But instead, everybody saw it was the power of God that multiplied the loaves and the fish. And with this, the Good Shepherd provides for his sheep abundantly, even with leftovers. As David said in Psalm 23:5, my cup overflows. It just keeps coming. I mean, it just overflows. And the blessings are in both this life and eternity. David says this, we read it earlier, surely goodness and loving kindness will pursue me all the days of my life. But there's more. And I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. This is the very end of Psalm 23. And this was then just a sample and proof of Christ himself being the one and only Good Shepherd that David is talking about. When we study the whole Bible, we follow it, we follow the court case, and we put out the documented evidence, and boom. And yet, you got to get this part right, you prosperity gospel seekers, which I don't think there's any of them here. These continued blessings would only come for the sheep that would follow him as Lord. Luke 9:23, the ones that would come after him, that would deny themselves and take up their cross daily. That's where the continued blessings go. God gives general and common grace to all mankind. How many people, how many guys out there that are the most evil guy in the world had breakfast today? He continues to give blessings, but the continued blessings will only come for those that say, the Lord is my shepherd, and mean it. So we saw these 10 attributes in this passage of the Good Shepherd. And why do we see those things? So that you may seek his perfect righteousness and then receive his abundant blessings. We saw rest that he gives from work and worry. Recognition by all as the Good Shepherd. He has compassion on the lost sheep's spiritual, emotional, and physical needs. He offers righteousness, meeting people's greatest need, forgiveness for sin. We saw that because he laid down his life for his sheep. Response in answering prayer. He will answer our prayer one way or another. Patience in dealing with the sometimes foolish sheep, aka knuckleheads. Direction. He gives us direction in following his will. The next one is order according to his terms. I like this Jesus. You've heard me say this sarcastically every week. No, the Jesus that has his terms and his conditions, that's the Jesus, not the one made up in our own mind. He has integrity in leading from the front. Nobody's got anything on him. Well, Jesus, you don't know what I'm going through. Really? Look at his whole life. Oh yeah, there's that end part when he was on the cross. Nobody has anything on. He has led and demonstrated how to get through trials. He was tempted when he first started out his ministry by Satan himself personally, and all the same things. And Hebrews 4:15 says, and he never sinned. He leads by example. He has integrity, this good shepherd. And then provision in providing all of our needs as we seek his righteousness first. He will provide all of our needs according to what he says our needs are. So, the conclusion. King David confessed, Yahweh is my shepherd. With this, you got to get this part right. King David knew what the whole sheep and shepherding business. He was a shepherd as a young boy. He understood what he was saying. And this is the thing. Knowing sheep and knowing shepherds really well, he confessed this. The Lord is my shepherd. Okay, that's great. What is he really confessing here? David knew sheep pretty good. By him saying the Lord is my shepherd, David is admitting he's a sheep. David knows sheep. He knows that sheep are stubborn, stupid, and prone to wander off. And he's saying, the Lord is my shepherd. The King of Israel is saying, I'm stubborn, I'm stupid, and I'm prone to wander off. He's my shepherd. And he's the King of Israel saying this. He proclaimed, even though he's king, he proclaimed the Lord as his shepherd. In other words, David, I like being called Dave myself, but David was admitting that he himself was a sheep, stubborn, stupid, and prone to wander. He admitted about himself. He admitted the truth about himself. As Isaiah says, Isaiah 53:6, all of us, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us have turned to his own way. People say, I don't want to admit that. Well, David admitted it. The king admitted it. The key to having the Lord as our shepherd is to admit the truth about ourselves as King David did. The Lord is my shepherd. Is the Lord your shepherd? That's the question. And if he is, this is his command to us as sheep. He has terms and conditions. And with this, as we saw earlier, according to his plan, he has appointed under shepherds in the form of pastors, husbands, and fathers. We see this. He has terms and conditions for these things. Ephesians 4:11. I have a bunch of passages if you want to ask me later. Ephesians 4:11, 5:22, 6:1. All these roles of shepherding that he has assigned. And with this, the under shepherds are to lead their assigned flocks by the example. Which means, guys, your job is to seek after having these attributes yourself. Leading by example, not from the back. And with this, the other sheep are to follow the under shepherds as they follow Christ. So where are you leading your family? Where are you leading your wife? With this, as the under shepherds, and let me just say this, everyone here has some under shepherd to submit to. Everybody does. Ephesians 5:21 says that we are to submit to one another. Everybody has to answer to somebody besides God. We are all in a situation of having to submit to somebody. And with this, may we all seek his perfect righteousness and receive his abundant blessings. See these things about the Good Shepherd.